You are just another salary employee, nothing special. The line landed like a paper cut soaked in lemon juice. I was halfway through reconciling an export compliance log when the conference room screen flickered and revealed the new problem in high definition. His name was Blake Hart, 32 on paper, permanently auditioning for a podcast about hustle. The chief finance officer introduced him as an efficiency surgeon, which sounded impressive until you remembered surgeons usually wash their hands. Blake smiled into the camera. I am here to streamline operations, remove redundancy, and modernize legacy behavior. Legacy behavior. He said it like it came with dust. His gaze drifted across the faces and stopped on mine, the exact look you give an old printer you plan to unplug. I did not flinch. I clicked save on the workbook that kept regulators from turning our office into a bonfire. Then I opened a folder on my desktop and renamed it Church Chili Recipes. Inside sat renewal receipts, regulator emails, and signature chains that proved one simple truth. Northfield Kinetics did not really own compliance. I did. My name is Tessa Ward, 41. 12 years at Northfield Kinetics. I had survived 3 rebrands and 2 mergers. I had also survived executives who believed compliance was optional as long as the logo looked modern. By lunch, Blake was already joking near the espresso machine about antique workflows. Then came his new daily huddle, a standing meeting designed to punish kneecaps. Blake presented slides stuffed with phrases like frictionless governance loop. People nodded like they were receiving prophecy. Some team members with legacy responsibilities will be reassessed for alignment, he said. His smile aimed at me. We appreciate your historical contributions, Tessa. Historical. Like my desk belonged in a museum. I smiled back. The polite kind. The kind that says you can keep talking, but I am already counting the exits. Quick pause, because I have to play the modern game too. If you are listening and you are not subscribed, tap that button. I am trying to hit 10,000 subscribers so I can buy a chair that does not squeal like a haunted clarinet. Most of you listen without subscribing. One click, and you make my day. Back to the corporate horror show. That evening I stayed late, not because anyone asked, but because I wanted to watch the system breathe while it still recognized me. I logged into government portals, confirmed active authorization, and verified the certifying officer ID still matched my credentials. Then I printed my employment agreement and highlighted a clause nobody reads. Section 8. D. If employment ends involuntarily, all employer-funded regulatory credentials linked to the employee profile become void and must be rescinded within 48 hours. The next morning, Blake taped a poster above the copier. Compliance does not equal complacency. The font looked like it belonged on a children's menu. By Friday, an email hit every inbox. Role evolution interviews. Everyone required to reapply for an elevated operating model. It was sold as growth, like being forced to audition for your own rent. I booked the last slot of the day and cleaned my desk with slow, careful movements. Not because I feared losing my job, but because I wanted my trap to be tidy. Blake thought I was legacy overhead. I was the only person holding the keys. And if you have ever been underestimated in fluorescent lighting, you already know what comes next. Receipts, timing, and a match. My interview lasted 7 minutes. Blake measured humans in percentages. Tessa, he said, eyes glued to his laptop. You have been here a while. 12 years, I replied. Right. Institutional memory. Valuable, but we are shifting toward lean ownership. He clicked through an org chart. A box labeled regulatory control used to hold my name. Now it held open assignment. Foundational tasks followed, rewriting labels on mop buckets, reorganizing a supply closet, humiliation disguised as strategy. The real insult arrived an hour later. Blake reassigned my upcoming export audit preparation to an intern named Jaden, who asked if restricted party screening meant blocking people on social media. I asked politely, whether I still had administrator access to the compliance dashboard. Blake blinked twice. We routed that to Celia last week. You do not need it anymore. Celia had been hired 6 weeks ago and still treated PDFs like magic. I nodded, thanked Blake, walked to a terminal in the training room, and opened the shadow admin panel I built years ago for emergencies. In 2 minutes, I revoked Celia access, logged the action, and set a rule. Any attempt to override licensure fields would trigger an audit alert. By Wednesday, I was locked out of 3 systems I had designed. Each lockout came with a cheerful pop-up: contact your system administrator. I laughed once because the system administrator was currently being asked to alphabetize bleach. Human resources did not help. Their new policy required all requests to route through departmental leadership. That meant Blake. That meant my complaints went straight into a shredder wearing cologne. So I prepared. I booked 10 minutes at a notary office above a nail salon. The waiting room smelled like acetone and quiet desperation. I slid a document across the desk titled Voluntary Relinquishment of Certifying Authority. I did not sign it. I notarized my option to sign it, a loaded tool wrapped in polite paperwork. On my way back, I bought a peppermint latte and practiced my calm face in the elevator doors. Blake passed me in the hallway and said, "Hope you are feeling more aligned this week." "I am tying up loose ends," I replied. The termination happened on a Monday morning. Blake called a momentum sink and stood at the front like a preacher with a budget. "Candor time," he announced. "Certain legacy positions are no longer critical to our forward motion." He stopped behind my chair. "Effective immediately, the position held by Tessa Ward has been eliminated." 2 human resources representatives approached with a glossy folder, eyes aimed anywhere but my face. I accepted it, flipped to the exit form, and saw the severance line, blank. I signed anyway. One clean stroke, because I had already memorized Section 8D. "I will need a printed copy," I said. "It is digital," one representative whispered. "Printed," I repeated. 4 minutes later, I walked out with paper in hand and the calm of someone who had just pressed a button nobody else knew existed. At 7:12 that evening, my phone buzzed. Confirmation: certifying officer profile rescission initiated. Entities tied to this profile will be marked non-compliant in 24 hours unless reassigned by a registered replacement. I poured a glass of cheap red wine, cued a comedy special, and slept like a woman who had finally stopped carrying other people's blindness on her back. Somewhere in a glass office, Blake was still smiling. He did not realize the clock had started, and it was counting in regulator minutes. Tuesday morning arrived with emails that sounded like sirens in business casual. Procurement could not confirm shipment of controlled microsensors for a defense contract. The vendor response was blunt: receiving entity authorization inactive, certifying officer required, contact listed, Tessa Ward. At 9:06, the export filing API returned a rejection code. At 9:18, the internal compliance dashboard began flashing red like a holiday display built by a demon. Blake strolled in with a designer coffee cup and said, "We will just update the contact field." Jaden, the intern, raised a hand and asked, "How do we update it?" Celia suggested, "Maybe we can drag and drop the license." The dashboard had no drag and drop. It had consequences. I was not there to hear it. I was at home in sweatpants eating cereal that tasted like regret, reading a blind copied email chain from an old coworker with a conscience. Legal wrote, "Can we override the certification status in the dashboard?" Blake replied, "Where is the toggle for that?" There was no toggle. There was a rule set. By noon, Blake tried brute forcing his way into the shadow panel. The system logged the attempt, blacklisted his device, and generated an internal audit alert. Watching him fight a system I built was like watching someone argue with gravity. Then the chief executive officer returned from a conference, tan and clueless. His name was Roland Kane. He walked into operations expecting applause and got silence that could curdle milk. "What is with the red lights?" Roland demanded. A manager explained shipments were frozen, filings rejected, and the regulator portal had flagged us as non-compliant. Roland turned to Blake. Fix it. Blake swallowed. We are reassigning authority. You mean you fired the authority? Someone from audit muttered. Roland stared. Who was the certifying officer? No one wanted to say my name, as if it might summon me through the ceiling tiles. Finally, a senior analyst said, Tessa Ward. Roland blinked hard. Get her back. Human Resources tried calling, then emailing, then messaging through a professional networking platform. My phone lit up like a slot machine. I did not answer. I made soup and added extra pepper. Small pleasures matter when you are watching people chew through the furniture they once used to prop up their ego. At 3:40, a notification arrived from the Federal Export Registry. Site compliance review scheduled within 72 hours. Randomized selection. Randomized is a comforting word. It makes people feel safe, like lightning only strikes the careless. Wednesday morning, Roland held a crisis meeting. Legal asked how long to register a new certifying officer. A regulator hotline call answered with a calm voice. Re-registration requires training, exam, and background verification. Typical timeline 4 to 6 weeks. Roland looked like someone had unplugged his spine. We have a review in 72 hours. Late that night, a message arrived from Roland Assistant. Urgent request for a call. We are prepared to discuss terms. I read it, set my phone down, and turned on music. Roland sent another email marked urgent, then another. The subject lines escalated from request to directive to please. Blake started calling meetings inside meetings, like panic could be stacked into productivity. I watched the timestamps roll by and wondered how many buzzwords it took to replace a credential. Apparently, more than they had. Thursday morning, another alert popped up. On-site review scheduled Friday, 10 o'clock. I smiled, not because I enjoyed chaos, but because Blake had finally reached the part where consequences stopped being theoretical, and Friday was almost here. Friday morning began with panic traveling through email threads at the speed of shame. At 9:23, federal inspectors arrived in dark jackets and neutral expressions. They carried clipboards and the quiet authority of people who do not care about your culture deck. The receptionist called compliance. Compliance called legal. Legal called operations. Operations called Blake, who sprinted down the hallway like a man trying to outrun his own haircut. The lead inspector asked one question. Who is the registered certifying officer? Blake tried confidence. We are transitioning that role. The review cannot proceed without an active officer present, the inspector replied. If the facility cannot provide one, the review is recorded as a failure. Roland arrived, face pale beneath the tan. He pulled Blake into a glass conference room, which meant everyone watched. You eliminated the certifying officer, Roland said. Blake tried the corporate prayer. We needed efficiency. Roland snapped. This is self-sabotage with a slide deck. By noon, the inspectors left. The failure notice hit client portals within hours. Vendors froze contracts. A defense partner issued a suspension letter. A biotech client demanded proof of authority by end of day. At 2:15, I received a calendar invite titled Restoration Discussion. It came with a message from Roland. We request your assistance. We are prepared to be flexible. Flexible, like a bridge collapsing politely. I replied with an email subject line that made me grin. Subject: Section 8D and the cost of amnesia. Roland. Attached is a highlighted copy of Section 8D, the signed termination form, and the registry confirmation showing rescission of certifying authority tied to my profile. The timeline is not negotiable. I also advise correcting any public claim of active certification status, as your marketing language may conflict with the registry record. Tessa Ward. Back at Northfield, legal drafted an offer, 6-month consulting contract, heavy fee, bonus structure, and a silence clause. Roland sent it within the hour, as if money could patch a missing foundation. I did not accept. Instead, I called Larkspur Dynamics, a competitor known for winning contracts by doing boring things correctly. Their director of compliance, Marin Cho, answered. I said, I can register as certifying officer under a new entity immediately. My credentials are clean and documented. There was a pause, then a low laugh. Northfield let you go. Yes, I replied. They confused lean strategy with self-harm. Marin said, come in today. So while Northfield tried to duct tape a sinking ship, I sat in a quiet office at Larkspur and reviewed an offer that included 3 things I had not heard in months: respect, authority, and a chair that did not squeak. Before I signed, I pulled one more thread. Northfield Marketing had banners and press releases about continuous certification. Those claims were now, objectively, false. So I filed an anonymous compliance notice through the regulator portal. No drama, no opinions, just screenshots and dates. The next morning, an industry alert hit my phone. Regulator opens inquiry into certification claims by Northfield Kinetics. I sipped my coffee and felt the balance shift. This was not just revenge now, this was accountability with a paper trail. Roland called again that afternoon. This time his voicemail did not sound like a commander. It sounded like a man bargaining with gravity. He offered a title, then a bonus, then the possibility of shared leadership, which is the phrase executives use when the floor is on fire. I signed with Larkspur that same day. When the ink dried, my new badge printed in under 2 minutes. Efficiency, it turns out, is easy when you stop wasting it on ego. And somewhere across town, Blake Hart was learning a brutal lesson. You cannot streamline a system you do not understand. 3 weeks later, the professional networking platforms did what they always do. They pretended surprise while secretly enjoying the spectacle. Northfield Kinetics issued a statement about temporary administrative disruption. Vendors responded by extending freezes. Clients responded by taking their money elsewhere. Regulators responded by asking for records Northfield could not produce without a certifying officer's signature. Roland tried to call me again. Then he tried to send a courier. Then he tried to route a message through a mutual board member. Every attempt had the same energy, a man knocking on a door he set on fire. Meanwhile, I started at Larkspur Dynamics on a Monday morning with a clean badge, a quiet office, and a compliance team that treated my work like infrastructure instead of a punchline. Marin introduced me to the staff and said, "This is Tessa Ward, she keeps companies alive." No one laughed. No one smirked. People nodded like adults. Within 48 hours, my certifying officer profile was active under Larkspur. Within a week, we submitted filings Northfield had failed to send. Within 2 weeks, Larkspur won a contract Northfield had once called untouchable. Roland watched revenue graphs drop like elevator cables. The board demanded accountability. Legal bills piled up. A defense partner threatened debarment. The regulator inquiry expanded. Blake Hart became a cautionary tale wearing a badge. He updated an internal spreadsheet called Lessons Learned, which was poetic because spreadsheets were the only language he ever respected. His inbox stayed quiet. His calendar stayed empty. His confidence finally met physics. One afternoon, I received a forwarded screenshot from a former teammate. It showed Blake in the office kitchen, staring at the same poster he taped above the copier, now curling at the corners. Someone had added a sticky note under it that read, "Modernization does not equal competence." Blake did not laugh. He just sipped his coffee like it was punishment. Then came the settlement, because reality always sends an invoice. Northfield agreed to pay penalties, fund external oversight, and correct every public certification claim. They also issued a private apology letter, signed by Roland, which sounded sincere in the same way a hostage note sounds heartfelt. The last line said, "We hope you will consider returning in any capacity." I considered it for exactly 1 breath. Then I replied with 5 sentences. "Roland, I will not return. I already rebuilt. Please remove my name from all materials, internal and external. I suggest you stop hiring slogans and start hiring competence. Respectfully, Tessa Ward. After that, I muted the email thread and went back to work because revenge is satisfying, but peace is profitable. A month later, Larkspur held a small event for a new partnership launch. There was a banner, but it did not scream. It simply stated, certified, verified, accountable. Marin raised a glass and said, "To the people who keep the lights on." I raised mine and thought about Blake calling me nothing special. I thought about the supply closet labels. I thought about the poster above the copier. Then I laughed, quiet and honest, because the funniest part of corporate arrogance is how predictable it is. They always think the quiet person is harmless. They always forget the quiet person might be holding the keys. If you enjoyed this story and you want more dramatic office survival, do the subscribe thing. I am building a whole library of witty revenge and workplace chaos, and I want you in on it. Tap subscribe, leave a comment, and tell me the worst buzzword you have ever heard in a meeting. Until next time, keep your receipts and keep your exits mapped.